Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other week to discuss a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yes.
I'm looking at you on a screen in front of a bunch of people.
That's very weird.
All right.
I'm really glad I can't see.
Can everybody say hello to the Reverend Sarah Condon and the Reverend Rutger Jan Heyman? Well, let's get going. How are you guys doing? What's, Sarah, near-death experiences? Am I allowed to announce that? What's going on?
I went looking for cars today, so that's what I've been doing. Yesterday, I was driving my mom's car. So my mom and my dad died in December, and I already make jokes about it, so buckle up. But I inherited my mom's Yukon XL, and
2005 cherry red.
2015.
Okay. 2015. That's right. 15.
Yeah,
my bad.
That's right. And it just stopped in the middle of the freeway yesterday, and those things are big, so it took up 2 lanes, and I went like screaming and running out of it because I did not want to get hit. It was really scary. Anyway, it needs a new transmission and we're getting a new car, so that's what I've been doing today, is looking at cars.
Well, have you been on the phone with RJ constantly then? Because
I have texted him so much, you have no idea.
Except I gave her more information than she ever could possibly want.
No, it was very helpful.
About the,
RJ's like, well, that engine was discontinued in 2014, and in 2015, they were taken over by Kia. You know, every time I text him
No,
about...
I was strongly advocating for a Kia or a Hyundai, but apparently she's going to go Toyota, which is a little predictable, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm nothing if not predictable.
Exactly, Sarah.
Oh my gosh, you are anything but predictable. Well, anything else going on in Heyman world? What's happening in Florida?
We just sent my son Spencer off for like 10 days in Texas. He's going to go spend like a week with his friends in Houston and then fly to Austin, help my oldest son pack up, and they'll be home in like 10 days. So that's kind of, summer's approaching. Mm-hmm. And, you know, what can I say? It's been a good day. I played 18 holes this morning, par 3. So there you go. Just living it's my day off. It's my day off in my defense.
For some reason, you're more insufferable in this format than usual.
Yes, that makes sense.
Big
Good.
vibes right out the gate.
Right out of the gate. Well, it's Mother's Day this weekend, in case you hadn't known, in case you're not prepared. And so, well, actually, I should say, we're having a great time in Tyler.
Hey.
You were missed terribly, Sarah. RJ,
yes.
You know.
Yes, I know. It's okay.
As always, take it or leave it.
I'm the third wheel. I know. I get it. You know.
Someone the other day wrote in and said that, or on iTunes was saying that, like, I can't decide which one of you is my favorite. You're all, even RJ is a member of the secret sauce of the Mockingcast.
Amazing. Even RJ. Incredible.
You're like the relish
He's like
after.
the only one that ever quotes the Bible.
Yeah, he's the one that quotes the Bible.
Keeping it Christian.
Christian.
Well, it's beautiful here in Tyler, Texas. And it's also going to be Mother's Day here in the Rose City. That's what they call it. And so I thought I'd open up with this article by Arthur Brooks, which appeared in The Atlantic this week. 3 simple ways to make your mom happier. Everyone taking notes? Here we go. Motherhood is supposed to bring unparalleled happiness. The Bible, for example, RJ, is full of stories of women, Sarah, Hannah, Elizabeth, who go from sorrow to joy when God grants them an unexpected child. In real life, the relationship between happiness and motherhood is more complicated. Raising small children is far from unmitigated bliss. year after year, surveys that ask mothers what they most want for Mother's Day find that their number one answer is, Sarah?
Be alone.
Time alone. That's right.
I haven't even read this.
She hadn't read it.
Sarah never actually reads any of the articles. I'm just gonna.
We like the impulsive reactions.
The spontaneity, yes.
Yeah, spontaneity. As children grow up, mothers' mixed feelings seemed to stick around. Research suggests that plenty of mothers feel some resentment toward their adult progeny, especially when the relationship feels unequal. Logically, a mother's overall well-being should rise as kids grow up because the pressures of raising young kids decrease, while the sense of meaning that adult children bring their mothers stays high. But the opposite appears to be true. In 2016, 3 social scientists looked at the life satisfaction of women with and without kids. They found that during childbearing years, mothers and mothers-to-be were happier than non-mothers. However, by age 40 and beyond, mothers' life satisfaction levels were generally a bit lower than their childless counterparts. Researchers studying mothers have also found that almost 54% said their relationship with their adult child or children was, quote, intimate but also restrictive, and that they had, quote, mixed feelings about the relationship or some ambivalent statement. The strongest predictor of ambivalence toward an adult child was whether their mother continued to financially support them. And the biggest predictor of interpersonal stress between adult child and mother was her affirmative answer to the question, do you feel that you give more than you receive in this relationship? Then he goes on to actually say a few ways that adult children can make their mother happier. The first one is, at the most obvious level, adult children can lower their mother's resentment and stress by decreasing their financial dependence. Which has been repeatedly found to be a significant source of family conflict. But secondly, and I'll spare you the third one, is they encourage adult children to host a holiday at your place for once. So that's a lot, and I know even the subject of mothers is, I mean, in all sensitivity, it's not the easiest subject right now. What does this sound true to your experience, or what kind of thoughts did this bring up for you?
I mean, I'm just like, why does everybody have to be happy? You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, what is this, like, comparison? Like, but you got a kid. That's kind of amazing. And, like, what is love without suffering? Like, it's not love. I don't know. I mean, I can relate to some of the things about some of the financial stuff. Like, I remember, like, the first time we paid for dinner out with my parents, they were like, what is this? You know? And it was like kind of a moment of really beautiful grace. But yeah, I don't know. All this like happiness stuff, especially now, I'm just like, what? I don't know. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, you're slightly less happy and like, but you have like adult children and like they're people in the world, and that's an amazing gift. I don't know. I don't mean to be insensitive to like all the 60-year-old women sitting there right now who are like, just wait. But like, and I know, I mean, I definitely like, you know, have heard moms of adult children complain. Like, I know all the issues, but yeah, I don't know. These things hit me in a different way now.
I bet. Yeah. Well, how do they hit Rutger?
RJ's mom still pays for his cell phone. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just pays for everything. No, I was going to say that's one of the things this article makes me grateful for, is one of the things my father was very clear about is like, when you graduate from college, we'll get you that far, and then you are, quote unquote, off the payroll. And there definitely have been times when I have been a little jealous of, people who've gotten more help financially from their parents kind of after college than I received. But it seems like, according to this article, that probably was the best thing for our relationship. I think, and I don't know this from experience, but I know it from talking to other people, I think it's hard for mothers to lose their kids. You know, I mean, I can say from experience, we now have a freshman in college. And it's hard. It was hard to have him go, and it's hard every time he comes back and leaves again. You know, when you're a mother, and you just pour so much love and time and effort and money and sacrifice so much of yourself for your child, and then they kind of leave and go off to their own existence. I think that's a really hard thing, and especially if you have more than one child. I think if you devoted your life to being a mother, and then suddenly your kids are gone, I've got to think that brings about something of an identity crisis, right? I've always been a mom. That's been my life's work, and now it's gone. And so I'm very, I'm sensitive to how hard that is to make that transition from being a mom to try to figure out what am I now that I'm not sort of a mom in the day in, day out kind of way that I used to be. And my wife and I have talked about that. I think the other thing is that, parents, I think anytime parents are expecting their relationship with their kids to be equal and reciprocal, you're entering into something of a danger zone, right? I really hope that I never put a tremendous amount of pressure on my sons to call. That when they do call, I'm not like, why didn't you call sooner? I haven't talked to you, I've talked to you in ages. My hope is that the fewer expectations I can have, the more likely they might actually be to call. And that Jamie and I have already talked about this, like our kind of retirement dream is to have a home in a place that our kids and grandkids are going to want to come visit. And then when they're not visiting, we'll get a pickup in an Airstream and just drive around the country and stop in and say hi every so often and try to help out with the kids and try to pay for meals and just do everything we can to be present, but not expect too much in return. Because the other thing is, I think you sometimes you always forget what your life used to be like, right? And I think sometimes it's easy to forget how impossible it is to be a young parent. It's like the hardest thing in the world, how lonely it is, and how I've also thought how ironic it is that the time in your life when you need the most time and you need the most money, you have the least amount of both of those things. And then, at some point, Jamie and I are going to reach a place where we have too much time, and I don't want to say too much money, but more money than we need. And hopefully we can use those resources to continue to bless our kids and not expect too much in return. But we'll see how it goes. Ask me ask my kids in 20 years if they're like, parents won't shut up. Oh my God, keep them out of our hair. So those are my.
It makes me think a lot about actually my mom, just because we spend so much time together, and Dave and I have talked about this a ton. Like, I keep wanting to write this piece, but I haven't, about shopping. Because we shopped together. Like, that was like when we could talk and when we could really begin to have, sorry, there's like a picture of her right there. Begin to have a friendship. And like the first time that like I was able, like, you feel like a low key sketchiness when you're like 23 years old and you're out shopping with your mom and you're like, I hope she pays for this, and like,
Totally.
And there's something about like being old enough that you pay for your own stuff that, like, she said to me in the last year of her life, like, I feel like we're finally friends now. And I think that some of that financial stuff, I mean, as much as we don't want to admit it, probably had something to do with it. Because we could be together without, it's kind of like what you're saying, RJ, but from the opposite sort of perspective. Like, I could be with her without this like anxiety to try to like get out of her, like, a 17-year-old wants to get,
Totally.
her mom to buy stuff or whatever.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Yeah. That's what stuck out to me, too, was the source of resentment being that there's some sort of equalness to the parent-child relationship when, I mean, I get it. We've talked about it before, but church on Mother's Day is such a dodgy proposition because it's kind of there's a lot of people there under duress, They don't really want to be there, but they're there because of their mom. And that's sort of funny, and we can make jokes about it. And hey, Father's Day, no one's here, but then you get to
hilarious. None of the men want to go to church.
It's so funny. They're so grown up. But you get to, there's always people coming out of church that day that have such sorrow on their face, and they just say, I can think of 3 faces right now of these are women in their 60s, basically, who are just like, why won't they call? Like, what happened? Like, there was no, I don't see it as abusive. Like, is there anything there? They look at me as if I would know, like, how do I get, and it's usually the son, but it's sometimes the daughter. It's like, how do I get them to call me? Just not, and they're not asking for every week. And so, the mother-child relationship is obviously really complicated, but it's such a painful thing. And when I hear that, I don't hear them asking for some sort of reciprocal 50-50 egalitarian relationship. They just want some acknowledgement, some attention paid them. And maybe Catholics have it right with honoring Mother Mary, because we sort of don't know what to do without any of that. And maybe we could do a better job of it. I don't know.
Just to name a thing, too, I think it's not too much to say that so many marriages seem to fall apart or come to an end at roughly the same time that the kids leave home. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like we were holding it all together, and now that the kids are raised and off to college,
and this won't affect them at all now that they're gone.
Yeah, that's right. This won't impact every Christmas and Thanksgiving for the rest of time. You know, but it does. I think, you know, the answer probably, I don't know what the answer is, but I think that just ups the ante, right? Because now if like the kids have gone and like your parents are unmarried too, then it just kind of ups the pressure even more. Whereas I'm certainly hoping to continue to be married after my kids leave home, and my hope is that you know, that Jamie and I will satisfy enough of each other's emotional needs that we won't. You know, of course, I'm going to want the kids to call. I'm going to want to spend time with the kids, but I'm not going to count on them in the same kind of way emotionally as I think ends up happening with some parents when they're alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say here, I have had those conversations, Dave, with parents who are like, I can't get my adult children to call me, what should I do? And I actually would suggest something, and that is go to 6 months of talk therapy and then tell your kid that you're going to therapy. That would be my suggestion.
That's a good suggestion, Sarah. That's a really good suggestion.
I mean, because seriously, it says like, I take this relationship seriously to figure out what might be going on with me, that you don't want to be around me. I've been in therapy 6 months. Like, I see this, and we all see it in ministry a lot, this dynamic, and I can't tell you how often that situation could be fixed if the adult child was like, oh, like they're trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure myself out. So anyway, I just, you know, do what you will with that.
Wise.
No, I think that's very wise. I always think of guilt is such a governing emotion around mothers and kids, I think. There's that New Yorker cartoon of the woman standing up at her mother's funeral and says, Mom wouldn't want us to feel sad, she'd want us to feel guilty. I said that from the pulpit one Mother's Day, and like it was the most uncomfortable laughter I've ever heard anywhere. But, you know, when a child feels responsible for their parents' emotional well-being, they may not even be aware that they're feeling that way, but it's going to drive them to not want to call, or call through gritted teeth. And I think that's...
It's swingers all over again. Why won't she call? When shall we call? She's not going to call until you stop caring if she's going to call. You know, the opening scene with Jon Favreau and
talk about a painful, uncomfortable
that could
scene.
very easily be about parent-child relationships and not just romantic relationships. So if you haven't seen Swingers, go watch Swingers.
So I guess it's a question of expectations a little bit, and that's what we're going to talk about next. The grim secret of Nordic happiness. How do you guys feel about Finland?
I met a bunch of Finns recently. There's tons of Finns in South Florida.
What?
And one of them's dad was a world championship rally driver, which was amazing. So I've had a pretty exciting experience.
No car talk. No car talk.
No car talk. Sorry. I'll stop the car talk. I'll stop the car talk.
Do you have any feelings about Finland, pro or con, Sarah Condon?
I don't. Is that IKEA? I'm not sure.
Woo, we just lost all of our listeners in Finland. Well, according...
Shout out, and I'll learn where your country is.
Your favorite subject here, according to the World Happiness Report, Finland has surpassed Denmark as the happiest country on earth for the last 4 years running. I think Iceland is number 2, but the distance between Finland and Iceland...
It's so hard to make a joke about white people, Dave. Sorry, keep going.
The amount of happiness things they fill out is just
a whole lot of white people with their white furniture from IKEA being happy. Okay, keep going.
The furniture itself is white too, as we've talked about before. This is what Jukka Savalainen in Slate writes. Finland hasn't always had such a blissed-out reputation. In 1993, 60 Minutes featured a segment on Finland, which opened with this description of Helsinki pedestrians. This is not a state of national mourning in Finland. These are Finns in their natural state. Brooding and private, grimly in touch with no one but themselves. The shyest people on earth, depressed and proud of it. As far as facial expressions of the Finnish people, not much has changed since then. We are still just as reserved and melancholy as before.
I'm like, is my firstborn from there?
The secret is out. As it turns out, the World Happiness Report does not pay attention to smiles, laughter, or other outward expressions of joy. Instead, the report relies on Gallup polls, which ask respondents to imagine a ladder with numbered steps. The top rung represents the best possible life for you, while the bottom rung represents the worst. The survey participants are then instructed to report the number that corresponds to the rung on which they are currently standing. In other words, you are deemed happy if your actual life circumstances approximate your highest expectations. Consistent with their Lutheran heritage, the Nordic countries are united in their embrace of curbed aspirations for the best possible life. This mentality is famously captured in the law of Jante, a set of commandments believed to capture something essential about the Nordic disposition to personal success, such as, you are not to think you are anything special, you are not to imagine yourself better than we are, and you're not to think you are good at anything. Oh, we're not in Texas. The Nordic countries provide decent lives for their citizens and prevent them from experiencing sustained periods of material hardship. Moreover, they embrace a cultural orientation that sets realistic limits to one's expectations for a good life. People are socialized to believe that what they have is as good as it gets, or close enough. The mindset explains why Finns are the happiest people in the world despite living in small apartments, earning modest incomes. Maybe American parents should stop encouraging their kids to aim so high and suggest more realistic goals. One day, sweet Riley, you too can be the president of the Homeowners Association. And this is the Finnish writer speaking, I'm not sure I agree. If that's happiness, count me out. My definition of happiness includes joy, love, and meaningful engagement with the people around me. The reason why I decided to stay here in the United States, despite a couple of efforts to return to Finland, is because I like it when people smile, laugh, and yes, even talk to their neighbors. It makes me happy. RJ, you sent this to us, I believe. Is that correct?
I did. I thought it was.
You're a Nordic
really
person. What?
Dutch, but close enough since we're just lumping everyone together. The word reasonableness, like reasonable. I've been thinking about that word a lot because it appears in various places. Like one place is the Serenity Prayer, which I love, and I've kind of been thinking a lot about. Everyone knows the first stanza, but they don't know how it continues. And one of the lines in the Serenity Prayer is, trusting that he, meaning God or Jesus, will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. And I love that idea of reasonable happiness, because I do think in America in general, and specifically in places that are more economically advantaged, I think we think that supreme happiness, consistent happiness, constant happiness is kind of how we should be living, how we should be existing. And when the gap develops between that expectation and the reality of our lives, it creates a tremendous amount of pain and hiding and dishonesty, all sorts of stuff. And so the idea of being reasonably happy in this life. And there's also something in the Episcopal funeral liturgy that talks about having the comfort of a reasonable and holy hope. Mm-hmm. Something about reason, just tamping it down all a little bit, which I think is really helpful. And I find that to be helpful in my own life. Even when things are going, because I'll say, like in my life right now, things are going pretty good. They haven't always, right now they are. And I try to kind of hold it with a loose hand because I recognize that life is up and down, and sometimes things are going to be great and sometimes they're not going to be so great. But to keep expectations in sort of a neutral place. And then you can actually enjoy the the joyful moments without having to hold on to them so tightly. And then when things aren't so great, you know that will pass as well. And then the other thing, I love the what are they called? The rules or the laws that
Of Yante?
Yeah, I
Yante?
love those. And I think those are deeply biblical. You know, there's a passage in Romans that everyone, especially very sort of moralistic people, love to quote, which is it 12, where he's like, therefore, do not conform anymore to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds just so amazing. And the very next thing he says, by the grace given to me, I say to you, do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought. You know, but it seems like that's the transformation he's talking about. It's not some sort of ethical, moral transformation. It's just about thinking about yourself with sober judgment and esteeming others as being better than yourself. And this is going to sound a little weird to say, but I'll say it. When there have been times in my life when things have gone well, you know, or ministries or whatever I've been involved in have gone well, and people will say to me, gosh, this is going really well. You're doing such a great job. You know, this is wonderful. And I'm always just like, well, yes, God has been good, and I'm really thankful, and we'll see if it lasts. And I think I freak people out a little bit when I don't take credit for things, but I don't want it. It stresses me out, you know? I would rather just give it to God and let it be. I mean, really, I'm really saying this. Like, I would rather just keep it in His hands, because I can't carry those kind of burdens. I can't carry that kind of expectation. All I can do is just do the best I can to be faithful and live one day at a time and keep things reasonable and trust Him for the rest. So I just don't want it. So I don't know.
I love that, RJ. I mean, I think, honestly, the preachers that are like, thank you so much, I deserve all the credit for this, are like, they sleep with parishioners. I'm sorry. That's like an easy math problem in church life. Like,
They sleep with parishioners, is that what you just said?
yes.
Yeah, okay, all right, got it.
You know, they like see a pretty lady and they're like, hey, like, I'm real dynamic and I'm doing all this stuff and I deserve maybe to do something I shouldn't be doing. Like, I don't know. I think it's a survival thing.
Maybe it is a little bit. It's a little survival.
Give the glory to God, you know? I mean, my poor college students that have to put up with me, like, whenever they say the word deserve around me, they always laugh because they'll be like, oh, well, you know, you deserve that, like, to each other. And it's that Luther quote, you know, like, you deserve, I deserve sin and death and hell, but for Jesus Christ.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, who invited her? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's a little confusing for me because it sounds almost like in Finland, like there's like people have these lower expectations for their lives, which I think is a wonderful and marvelous thing. But also maybe there's like less connection, like in community. Is that like, I'm just trying to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, and that always seems to be what the other social scientists say, is that like the biggest indicator of personal contentment or fulfillment has to do with how many social ties you have. Right. And it sounds like the Finns, you know, no thank you. So
yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, right? Sorry, my parents' death is so like the like AD in my life, right? So
please don't apologize.
Before they died, I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and she had some kind of a cancer diagnosis. Her husband had some kind of a cancer diagnosis, and the dog got a cancer diagnosis. And they had just been through it, and they had flooded in Harvey, and it was a really sweet sentiment, and I'm of course not good at those. And she said, you know, we set our son down, and we were just like, this is not normal. Like, what you're having is not a normal childhood. And I was kind of like, what? You know, like, I don't know. I mean, like, the thought I keep having about the loss we have experienced, honest to God, is who am I that I would think I would walk this world and not have something like this happen? Who am I that I think that things like this don't happen to people like me? Like, that's not how the world works. And I have to tell you, that's a much more sustaining thought than this isn't normal. And you know what I mean? These kind of like, I'm an exception to this happening, which I'm not saying that's what my friend was saying, but you know, none of us are exceptional when it comes to our skill sets or to, you know, to tragedy. So it does make me, I don't know if the word is happy, but the word is definitely like grateful for the life that I have.
That's very much like what Stephen Colbert said about, I think, his mom, or was it Anderson Cooper about his mom? Anyway,
it was Anderson Cooper about his mom.
yeah, that my mom never said why me. She said why not me. Like why not me?
Yes.
Why would I be exempted from the suffering of the world? And
Yeah.
Sarah, that's a good word about this is not normal, right? Because I've been going through that with my, again, freshman son in college who was looking forward to his second semester of senior year last spring and was really looking forward to his freshman year of college. We told him it was going to be so fun after he worked so hard in high school. And it's been kind of a nightmare,
Right.
you know? And this whole thing of it's not normal versus like, well, this happens. It's going to be okay. It's not. I know it's not what you hoped for.
Yeah.
It's sort of not what you. It's not what we told you it's going to be like. But these things happen. So the prayer is just. I don't know. I hate to say it, like it builds resilience. That sounds so, uncompassionate. But I don't know what else to say.
Calvin's father in the comic.
Yeah, exactly.
Builds character, son.
I have not said that to him. I'm just trying to love him as best I can.
Yeah, you don't want to say like, well, at least you're not doing college in Nazi Germany. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, we have had that thought. Like, at least we're not at war. At least you weren't drafted.
You could really hold
At least you
him
weren't
back.
drafted. You know.
But I also think it's just like getting him ready, and in some ways getting me ready, even as a careening towards 40-year-old woman for life, like to roll with it. And like, gosh, I mean, I tell you, I can roll with it in a way I never knew was possible. So, and also like to know that we are not alone. I mean, I said to Dave this morning, like, I know people look at what I've been through, and I've said this on the podcast before, but it bears repeating. I know people look at what I've been through and they don't want me to spiritualize it. They don't want me to talk about Jesus. They just want me to talk about trauma and pain and suffering and hurt. And that sounds so nice for them, but that sounds like I can't breathe. I mean, I really, like, I have to have oxygen in the room, and I have to know that the Lord is resurrected for me and for my mama and daddy. And, it's only the people, and Dave said this to me. He came to the funeral for my parents, and he sat on a couch, and he said to me, it's going to be the people who haven't been through stuff that are going to be critical. And it's been 100% true. So, sorry, that was like a mini sermon, but I think it's, it's worth saying that, like, finding joy in what we've been given, and even, I mean, I'm like all over the place, but the car accident that I almost had yesterday when my car stopped and crossed 2 lanes of traffic and people were going 80 miles per hour around me. Like, my parents didn't escape their car accident, but I got to get out of that one. And there was something for me that I felt very protected and very loved. I felt their presence very present to me, and I felt lucky. So, that's not all bad. I mean, I can't believe I get 2 lessons, So,
Wow. Yeah, I was thinking about, we just heard a wonderful talk here that I can't wait for people to hear about original sin and the relief of it. And it struck me is that when you talk about this idea of normal and what's expected of a normal life, that I was reading something about this, that we suffer a very limited sense of what's normal. And that has to do, that's only getting smaller because of social media and what we're exposed to. And, the classic, we compare our insides with other people's outsides. But what the Christian faith, part of what it can do in its preaching of the law, frankly, or the understanding of people as broken, sinful, cracked actors, if you will, is expand our sense of normalcy. So that, because if you have a really confined sense, a really limited view of what is quote unquote normal and therefore what's expected, anything that falls out of that, you're all of a sudden, what is the word? Abnormal, aberrant, that you're alone and singled out. Instead of the fact that the truth is, if you got inside anyone's mind, they're already in a lot of internal turmoil and pain, but B, you don't know what they've suffered. You have no idea or what they will suffer. But to advocate for a broader sense of what's normal, I think that's what the low anthropology basically does, though we don't say it in those terms. So any other thoughts on that before we move on?
It's also what the Bible does, because the Bible is full of crazy
Here he goes.
stories
Right.
about crazy stuff that happened to people, and there's, we've said this before, but one of the reasons Augustine to become a Christian sooner is because there was so much bad behavior in the Bible, and then he suddenly realized that it actually resonated with his real life. That he wasn't who he was trying to be, he was who he was, and that the Bible was full of good news for sinners like him. Anyway, so yeah, my little Bible guy plug.
Bible, you should read it.
The Bible.
The Bible. It's not just a book. It lives. In RJ's mind.
I used to be really scared of the Bible, man. I don't know when this happened exactly. A few years ago, I was like, wait, I kind of like the Bible. There's good stuff in there, actually. I think my earlier high school, super evangelical self never read the Bible because I thought I had to. And then I started actually to do it. And I was like, oh, this is good stuff in here.
Some good stuff.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Did you plug over?
Yeah, sorry.
Is it okay? You think we're telling people to read the Bible all of a sudden?
Poor Dave. We just see Dave. I mean, this is a pretty great way to do it live, because usually it's so awkward, and I'm sure it is awkward, but Dave is having to absorb all the awkwardness.
I wish you could you guys could at least turn the thing around so you could see that.
No, I'm terrified.
They're all staring. They're all staring at me. Okay, well, we're going to talk about mastery. This is Oliver Berkman, our friend and writer, in his wonderful newsletter, The Imperfectionist. This was sent yesterday. He says this. Stick with me. It's a little dense. It occurs to me that the fantasy of somehow stepping outside reality so as to control it undermines many of our most problematic approaches to time and productivity. It's the desire to somehow lever yourself outside of the unfolding processes of life, to achieve a dominant position above and separate from things, like some kind of godlike air traffic controller, to be the master and commander of your time. That, in my mind, is the yearning behind the desire to, quote, get on top of things. Note the metaphor. And behind the tendency to put important things off until you've, quote, cleared the decks of smaller tasks, or until some imaginary future point at which you'll have got your life into proper working order and real life can finally begin. It's surely also the secret longing of the compulsive planner. Any compulsive planners in here? Who want to scramble up to some vantage point from which it might be possible to know how the future unfolds. And of the efficiency obsessive, striving to become so perfectly optimized that there's no obligation or opportunity she'd ever have to fail at or decline. She wants to step outside the constraints of her finite time. By the same token, the most fruitful and practical ways of thinking about time and productivity come down to realizing that you're already inescapably part of and constrained by reality, that your time is already running out. And that's why you should give up on trying to reach a phase of life that's problem-free. It's also why you should stop trying to clear the decks and instead just get on with doing stuff that matters, while tolerating the fact that the decks aren't clear. It's why you should treat your pile of unread books and articles as a river instead of a bucket you might one day manage to empty. All of which is deeply unpleasant at first for anyone who feels this desire to achieve mastery over life, because it means acknowledging how horribly limited and finite and ultimately mortal you really are. Still, compared to the alternative approach, i.e. getting on top of things, it has the inestimable upside of not being completely impossible. And in the end, it's a huge relief and a spur to action and accomplishment. He concludes by saying, the reason you never feel on top of everything isn't that you're a particularly ill-disciplined loser. The reason you'll never get on top of everything is because you're inextricably enmeshed in the everything you've been struggling to get on top of. And I think that's it's another way of underscoring our sort of anthropology, our limitations, our creatureliness. But in the parlance of modern like optimization and time management, I found it to be deeply refreshing, because I was talking to someone recently who said that this is the year that they are finally on top of school for their children, and my initial response was like, I hate you. Like I'm so far away from that that I can't even see it. And our teachers are disappointed in me. But it creates, on top of already the demands in which we are living, it creates a sort of a guilt system, a feedback loop, by which you're chasing after something that's completely imaginary. As a limited person trying to achieve this. I don't know, does any of that resonate with you guys?
I brought a show and tell.
You just did show and tell?
No, I brought a show and tell.
Okay.
I mean, just grabbed it off my windowsill as you were talking.
Yep.
Everyone, this is my parents.
Oh my goodness.
And I tuck little things in here. A friend told me to do this. That's been like very helpful for me, that remind me of them. And the kids do stuff. So I just have to tell you this because it's hilarious. Splendid packets, because they had them everywhere.
Wait, you're unpacking Splenda packets that are in the urn with your parents' ashes?
They're with the ashes. Oh, okay. Yeah, I shove it all in there.
I'm tracking, all right.
Yep.
What else is in there?
And there's a bunch of sweet stuff, but I love this. This is hilarious to me. So this is from my grandmother's funeral. It's stationery to thank people for coming to my mother's funeral. And my mother turned it into a to-do list. And I pull this out sometimes, both because I deeply love my mother's handwriting. And it says things like Target doll. So I know she's going to get some for Annie. But also it reminds me that she, like all of us, was someone that like lived one to-do list into the next. And I have a to-do list. I mean, I'm not telling people not to have a to-do list, but I have had to have so many days where all the things I was going to get done have not gotten done, and it has been fun. And it hasn't just been fun because I get some sort of a free pass because of what happened. Like, it's actually just been fun. So if there is a space to just like let go and to not feel like we're going to get to the end of all our tasks, and to, I don't know, actually believe that the freedom of Jesus is real. I hope that you can find it. And I hope you don't have to find it in such a hard way, but I hope that you can find it, because it's definitely there for you to find.
I had a real experience of that. Was it this Monday or last Monday? Who knows? But I'd had a really hard week or so, or 10 days, where I'd had some sort of church function or kid function or something, like for 8 out of 10 nights or something like that. And I ended up working all day Saturday because I took some high schoolers to play paintball, and there's an outreach event, and I had a dinner, and then church, and then we had another dinner on Sunday night. And I got to Monday morning and I was just wiped out. And usually today's my day off. I take Friday off. So I was supposed to go in the office, and I'm like, okay, I could force myself to go in, and I would sit at my desk and stare at my computer and just try to answer the emails I have to, or to get through my to-do list. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a little merciful with myself, and I'm just going to kind of stay home and watch TV or something, do whatever. Ended up not doing that. I mean, I did that for a few minutes. Then I was like, I'm going to get out. I went out and I just got a cup of coffee, and I got went to a little cafe and just read the newspaper, and I was just, it was kind of nice. I did that for probably 45 minutes. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do the rest of the day? I don't know. So I ended up working pretty much the whole day. But the reason it was an answer to prayer was because what I actually did was the most important thing I needed to do. And I knew it. And it was really what I ended up doing with my time. The work I ended up doing was something I really will be helpful, and it was good. And it wasn't little detail work, and it wasn't a to-do list. It was like the biggest to-do. It was the most important thing. right? But it would have happened if I'd forced myself to go in and sort of, because I keep my to-do list on my phone, and it's like 10 pages long. You could just scroll for days. And my fantasy, it skewered me, because my fantasy is like, someday my to-do list will be completely empty and I'll go home and just achieve nirvana. I'll get totally organized, which is never going to happen. But it was amazing that in the moment I decided to be a little bit merciful with myself for like literally 45 minutes. Suddenly I found the energy to do exactly what I needed to do. And it was ended up being a really, really good day. And I was like, oh, maybe there is a God. Maybe I'm not. Maybe he does answer prayer. Maybe I'm not in this my fast.
Maybe I should crack open the Bible.
Like every Monday for our.
No, I did not crack open the Bible.
Like maybe God is real. I don't know.
Maybe.
What you're saying reminds me of that line in Seinfeld when someone asked Newman, who's a postman, like, why postman, go postal? And he said, because the mail never stops. And that's how I feel about laundry. And I think we should just immerse ourselves in the river. If I could see laundry as a river and like the mail, then maybe I could think of it spiritually instead of as this thing that I'm just perpetually failing at. And this idea that one day all of the socks will have pairs, and then we will all ascend into kingdom come. But the idea of mastery is so, I think it's so seductive for Americans. I think it's very seductive for probably people in midlife who feel like they're chasing some sort of mastery. And I love, Berkman is trying to, I think, pronounce absolution on people who for whom the failure to finish a to-do list is not just a functional thing, it's a moral thing. Like it becomes an existential verdict that you are lacking, and there's these other people out there, these efficiency experts who really do have it all together. And again, it's a narrow view of what's normal. We think that what's the Onion article, like, man gets life in order for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Like once. I think that's actually much closer to normalcy. But this idea about mastery, it was brought up in a more, I guess, incisive or religious way a couple of weeks ago. So Ross Douthat, writing in the New York Times, he wrote an article, a very interesting piece about why elites in America, meritocratic elites, are unlikely to get religion anytime soon. And he's really talking about Christianity in this respect. But there's a Catholic writer named Audrey Polnow who wrote a response, and she agreed with what Douthat gives two reasons, and this is what Audrey says, though. She says, Ross Douthat offered a couple reasons that American elites are unlikely to get religion. First, they hold that irrational First, they hold anti-supernaturalist prejudices. Meaning anything that smacks of supernatural is just out the door before any discussion is had. Second, quote, the American educated class is deeply committed to a moral vision that regards emancipated, self-directed choice as essential to human freedom and the good life. This is Polnow writing. She says, I'll add a third reason. Religion undermines the sense of mastery, the experience of earned and earnable distinction, which is central to the identity of many American elites. To the extent that America is meritocratic, elites are winners in a system that divides people up on the basis of real, although only quite partial, virtues. They're usually clever, ambitious, organized, competent. It's hard for such people to, quote, get a religion like Christianity because it doesn't offer the sense of mastery which they're used to. In fact, it usually undermines it in a pretty shocking way. Most people who become Christian, who try to follow the commandments of the church, find that it's really difficult, and not in the good difficult sense that elites love, the hard workout, the challenging job, but difficult because it involves repeated failures which may continue for your entire earthly life. This is a, quote, life project where you don't get to view yourself as the hero. Instead, it requires that you accept you're going to be the, quote, difficult person in the relationship. That, on net, you'll be a recipient of forgiveness more than you get to be the person who generously offers it to those who are less fortunate, able, and virtuous. Almost everyone who tries to sincerely live as a Christian will find themselves confessing the same sins over and over. And this is particularly hard for elites to handle. They're used to either being able to write something off as, quote, not a problem, not something I need to work on, or being able to solve it decisively. But the idea that you need to keep struggling against something while also cultivating an attitude of peace and detachment about your own performance is, well, it's the opposite of meritocratic. Elites are just like everyone else in that they're sinners. But unlike everyone else, they're used to viewing themselves as special and especially as virtuous. To be clear, I'm not just blaming elites here. Christians sometimes fail to emphasize the extent to which Christianity is at war with meritocratic prejudices. But we need to emphasize both aspects of God's love for us. Not just that he calls us to radical transformation, but also that he loves us right now, just the way we are. The path to transformation might be messy, slow, and uncertain, and most of us will need to rely on being loved rather than rely on our prospects of success, prospects that might look dim most of the time. We will need to rely on being loved if we're going to keep going. Kind of a mic drop of an article. Does that map onto your experience of? I have a hard time. I don't know many people who say, "Hey, I'm an elite. Nice to meet you." You know, it's like I don't know those people, but apparently I spend a lot of time with them. What do you think? I mean, so I don't like the us versus them language particularly because I just don't think it's true to how people think of themselves. But I do get this: Americans, Western people, 21st century people, whatever. We thrive on the allure of mastery and the kind of retreating horizon in front of us, and we don't know how we would ever even get out of bed without it in front of us. And Christianity, I do think, undermines that in a way that can be shocking, as she says, but also of deep relief and comfort. But RJ, you were doing something.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the authors, I buy like 70% into the author's vision of Christianity, right? His vision of Christianity seems to be a lot more about effort and striving to keep the commandments and all that sort of stuff. And I probably err more on the side of grace and mercy and forgiveness and unconditional love and not quite so much effort. So I have a little bit, I'm like, eh. But the other thing is, no matter how meritocratic you are, it doesn't save you from the life's pains, from getting cancer, from children who won't call. My dad literally used to say to me and my brothers when we were not treating him with the respect that he felt he deserved, he's like, he would literally say to us, people at the office really respect me. He would say that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, no matter how much you've achieved or how meritocratic you are, or how great everyone thinks you are at the office, like, your kids don't care. Your wife doesn't care. Cancer doesn't care. Depression and alcoholism don't care. Yeah. And so, this whole, and we talked about this last week. You can be meritocratic as all get out and feel like you're special and that you've accomplished a great deal. But if you live a little bit in the world and have any kind of honest relationship with another human being, including yourself, it's very quickly all going to come tumbling down. And I guess you can sustain it with like a tremendous amount of denial or something.
Or alcohol.
Or alcohol, exactly. I was going to say that, substances. But that has not been my experience. My experience is that, so-called elites, and again, what does that even mean? Who is that?
It's you.
Yep. Is me. Okay, well, thank you. Seem to need Jesus just as much as anyone else. Now, they may not feel safe to talk about it. I will say that. They may be part of a culture where they don't feel safe to talk about vulnerability, weakness, failures, fear, things like that. But I do feel, given the opportunity, it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. And to me, that's the doorway to faith, right? Failure is kind of the doorway to faith. And your salary or your university posting is not going to save you from that.
Well, the first bone of contention I have with this author is that he asserted that elites aren't into the supernatural.
It's a she. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's
It's your gender.
Because clearly she like doesn't look at Instagram. Everyone believes in crystals and like, spending a lot of money on essential oils. And anyway, that's fascinating to me, that assertion that like they don't believe in the supernatural. Like everyone believes in the supernatural. They just do. Like, but yeah, I mean, I think the sermon that kept coming to mind, Dave, and I'm sorry this is obscure, but the guy who preached at the National Cathedral, and he ended it with the G.K. Chesterton quote.
David Brooks?
No, was it Gerson? Michael Gerson?
Yes.
The Depression one?
Yes.
Oh, that's a all-time greatest. Yeah.
It's an incredible sermon. And, preached in a place that doesn't have a lot of testimony, I would guess, when it comes to their preaching. And it was a sermon that was all over the place. And guys, I've never seen a sermon preached in the National Cathedral that's all over the place. It was so compelling because he spoke as someone who I'm sure, would be considered an elite, who had been through so much suffering and so much pain and really found the gospel there. It also makes me think of, Dave, I feel like I say this to you once a week, but how Paul Walker, I think someone said to your rector, so your head pastor of your church, or to you, why do you preach like everyone's always in an existential crisis? And it's like, but
do you believe? Yeah. Sorry. Yep.
It's not an existential crisis right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's that. I mean, it's the idea. Like when I preach to my students, some of them come in with this like pedigree of having like been born into the Episcopal Church, and some of them like aren't even Christian yet. And I preach to the ones who aren't even Christian yet, knowing that the ones who have grown up in the church need to hear it just as much, if not more.
Yeah.
One thing I really do agree with her on, and she kind of gets there, is that, Sarah, on the off chance that by some miracle someone actually goes to your church, actually shows up at church, to have a message that does not support or sort of fuel the fire of their meritocratic thinking, but actually sort of announces the end of it, and creates a space for vulnerability, honesty, humility, transparency, all that sort of stuff. And that probably has as much to do with the kind of tone of the sermon as opposed to the actual message that's delivered. But the church does have a incredible opportunity to just be like, nope, sorry, we don't play that game. Go if you want no mercy, you'll find plenty of it out there. If you want a little relief, come here. If you want to talk about about reality.
Yeah.
Here.
No, it's you mentioned the Serenity Prayer earlier, and one of the only bones to ever pick with AA, with Alcoholics Anonymous, is that there's a belief within it that there are addicts and then there are, quote, earth people. Basically, people that don't struggle with, they have a genetic makeup that they're not predisposed to addictive behavior around alcohol or metabolize alcohol in strange ways. And yet, if you dig beneath the surface of most people, they have those, that impulse is playing out in other ways. I mean, the deeper, I would say that's one of the places, and it's in the book that we published, the Grace and Addiction book. It's one of the things where John, my brother, says, well, this is one of the great places where the AA can actually learn from the church, because its diagnosis is so spot on, but it just doesn't go far enough. Everyone is a control freak addict of some variety who's going to make the same mistakes over and over and over again, and jaywalk into a highway. It's just going to look slightly different. It's not all going to have to do with distilled spirits or something like that. It could have to do with extreme smugness or really cool swag at a Mockingbird conference, or it could. There's all sorts of, status type games that people play that are compulsive and they can't seem to stop. So I don't know where I'm quite going with that, except
everyone has their own addiction, and it's just the church is Sinners Anonymous, or it should be something like that, right? Because it's that's anyway. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Well, where she ends up is to say that like the Christians, because they want to forward a moral vision of the world, which is legitimate and constructive in a lot of ways, they sometimes can be guilty of downplaying the fact that they're not even capable of realizing their moral vision, and that the only thing that is sustaining is this sense that God loves you, forgives you right now, and that's where she ends it. She's saying, like, just because mastery doesn't exist doesn't mean like the lack of mastery isn't painful, but the only way to continue living in that is with this proclamation through the Holy Spirit that you were loved and you were forgiven. It's Justin Bieber all over again, right?
And I'd also say, I got to think the impulse to mastery, if you really to talk to people who feel that need, not that I would know, is not coming out of necessary place of ego. Maybe sometimes it is, but probably more likely at a place of brokenness.
Yeah.
A place of not enoughness. Like if I could just master things, then maybe I'll be a worthwhile person.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe my parent will love me. Maybe I can love myself. It's not, it's not just. Yeah.
It's not. The only thing I want to say that I think is important to say, especially in a Mockingbird conference, because creativity is such a high value for us, is that, don't confuse mastery with creativity, right? Because like you say mastery, I think creative people, like there's something, it's mastery. I think that's the difference, RJ, exactly, is it's not fueled by a beauty or a desire to create. It's fueled out of brokenness. And we all have that. Dave seriously would have said this fall to you, this is the first time we felt on top of school. I would have said that, And then now I'm like, I don't know. I get these like text messages like nobody has a lunch. I'm like, oh shit, they still eat.
Yeah. Just basking in the grace of God, I suppose.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both. We have, places to go and people to see here in Tyler, Texas. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening, those of you who weren't here. And I hope everyone does get to watch some of these amazing presentations that are happening in Tyler. But the two of you, I hope to see you soon. I don't expect that we'll have mastered anything at that point. But
I'm going to guarantee it.
RJ, I'm especially confident that you won't have.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, love you too.
Good.
Love you
too.
guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.